Hi everybody, this is Katje and welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope everybody is having a good week. Soon it will be Thanksgiving and we all have a lot to be thankful for. I wish all of you well as you prepare for that holiday. This evening I wanted to kind of dress like a schoolgirl because I'm going to continue with some of the themes I was discussing last time. So let me show you my mini skirt with my fishnet stockings and my ankle boots. These make a nice outfit, I think, for a kind of scholarly look. I hope everybody's doing well this evening. Let me give you the look at the outfit from this side. So what I want to do tonight is basically, last time I mentioned that I've been rethinking some of my ideas in theology, and I want to try to come at that from a new angle. So part of what I'm going to do tonight is by way of introduction to that. I'm not going to try to do too much, but what I want to do is begin to discuss a philosopher whose ideas have been very helpful to me in developing this new angle that I'm coming from in order to sort of express some of these ideas. So what I want to do tonight is say a little bit about this philosopher, his biography, and then what I've been doing is I've basically been writing a kind of overview of the theological position that I want to develop, kind of in the style of some of his writings. I find that that's been very helpful to me in organizing my thinking, so I'm going to read some of that to you in the second part of my video this evening. But let me begin by saying a little bit about this philosopher whose name is Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was an Austrian philosopher. He was born in Vienna in 1889 into a very, very wealthy family. His father was an industrial magnate. I believe he was involved in the armaments industry and made a fortune there. So Ludwig had a number of brothers and sisters. You can consult the biography on Wikipedia to get more precise information. But he was an extraordinarily intelligent, a bright young person, a boy and a young person. And so in his teenage years, he went, later in his late teenage years, and in his early 20s, he went to study aeronautics in England, became very, very interested in that. And through his study of aeronautics, he became interested in mathematics. And slowly, as he was studying mathematics, he encountered the works of Gottlob Frege, a German philosopher-logician, and Bertrand Russell, who was an English philosopher-logician. So slowly Wittgenstein became very, very engrossed in the philosophy of mathematics and philosophy of logic, philosophical issues surrounding that. So in 1911, he went to Jena in Germany and met Frege. And then from there, Frege recommended that he go to Cambridge and meet Bertrand Russell. So Wittgenstein went to Cambridge, showed up unannounced at Russell's rooms in Cambridge in 1911, and immediately there was this very powerful relationship that began to develop between these two people. Early on, Russell realized that Wittgenstein was not just extraordinarily bright, but probably, and indeed was, a philosophical genius. And Wittgenstein was seeking to understand logic in a way that was free of philosophical confusions, to present logic and thinking in general in a way that was completely free of philosophical distortion. And so he was working with Russell on that initially, but then they began to drift apart. And I think it was around 1912 or 1913, Wittgenstein leaves Cambridge to go work in Norway on his philosophical project, and he basically built a cabin near a fjord in Norway and wanted to live alone. He was an extraordinarily driven, intense individual, probably very difficult to be around because he was extremely, as I said, impatient and intense and off-putting, had fairly poor social skills, but he was really fixated on philosophy and understanding logic in a way that was completely clear. So he was in Norway for quite some time until the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. Because he was from Austria and part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he decided to join the military and fight on the side of the Central Powers in World War I. He served on the front and was under fire, underwent a kind of religious experience while he was there, fortunately survived, and all the while he was working on his philosophical ideas and was actually taken prisoner, I think, by the Italians towards the end of the war. Finally the war is over and he's released. And so in the early to mid 1920s, he bounces around from various things. He tries his hand in architecture. He teaches elementary school in Austria. Evidently he was a rather demanding teacher who was not sparing of corporal punishment. He got into a lot of trouble for that. Really wasn't cut out to work with children. Probably really wasn't cut out to work with anybody because of his single-minded devotion to philosophy. But in any event, he did teach school in the Austrian countryside for some time before he became disenchanted with that, and also had to leave because of complaints from the local parents over the way he was interacting with the children. So to make a long story short, Wittgenstein eventually returns to Cambridge, and in the meantime he's written a book called Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, which is the culmination, the distillation of his philosophical thinking over those 10 years or so, and it's a work of genius. It's probably one of the few books that I've read in my life that has had an abiding influence on me. If I had to list the 10 most important books in my life, certainly that would be very high on the list. I have read it many times. It's a very difficult work. It's a very compressed work. Wittgenstein really doesn't mince words. It's a series of logical propositions that are numbered sequentially. It's very, very difficult, very, very concise and compressed, but it is a work of genius, and it sets forth a radically new view of what logic is and what philosophy, how philosophical confusions arise. It influenced an entire generation of philosophers in the 1930s. And so Wittgenstein eventually returns to Cambridge in 1929, and he becomes a doctoral student. He wants to teach as a professor because at some point he gave up all of his fortune to the poor, probably in connection with his religious conversion, and so he needed to have a source of income. So when he returns to Cambridge, he wants to become a professor of philosophy. In order to do that, though, you have to have written and defended successfully a dissertation. That's part of the process of becoming a professor of philosophy. And so he did do that, and his dissertation was the Tractatus. And Bertrand Russell and G.E. Moore, another great British philosopher, were his examiners. And he passed the examination. Of course, they realized that it was a work of genius. And at the end of this examination, his doctoral defense, Wittgenstein is supposed to have told them, he sort of clapped them on the shoulder and said, well, I know you didn't understand any of it, but thank you for being my dissertation reviewers, my examiners, and that was it. So then Wittgenstein goes on to spend the rest of his life and the rest of his philosophical career at Cambridge. I won't get into that. But in any event, Wittgenstein's work has been very influential on a number of people. I certainly have been influenced by it, and in particular, there are ideas in the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus that I find very, very helpful in kind of recrafting this theological perspective that I have been developing in some of my former videos. That may seem like an unexpected connection, but life is full of surprises, as we all know, and that's also true of philosophy and theology. So I think that what I want to do now is simply read to you some excerpts from this text that I'm writing. This is not a book, but it's also not just a summary, it's not just a list of theses, it is kind of a systematic overview of the kind of thinking that I want to present in this new theological perspective. So let me just read that to you. And I will conclude tonight's video with that. And also, if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the feed under the video, and I will do my best to answer them. But this is what I've written so far, and what I plan to do is put this onto Twitter at some point so that I can begin to get an audience for my next book. So the name of this overview is, in honor of Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, the name is Tractatus Theologico-Philosophicus. So I'm just going to read this for you, and like Wittgenstein, I have numbered these remarks to give their order. So 0.0. The following remarks set forth a radically new Christian theology. 0.01. The prefixed decimals indicate the proper order of the remarks. 0.011. One may follow the remarks' proper order by reading them as they appear in the Twitter feed. Viewed as a single page from top to bottom, the feed gives the reverse order. 0.02. Collectively, the remarks are neither a mere list of theses nor a comprehensive treatment, but a concise overview. 0.021. Everything must be said succinctly and precisely. 0.02101. So conceived, the remarks function as a map, orienting the reader to a terrain that is familiar to one foot, yet unfamiliar to the other. 0.2102. With the map, the reader can begin to negotiate the terrain without stumbling or wandering through it blindly. 0.02103. The terrain will be more fully expounded in a book. 0.2104. Thus, the reader of these remarks is a traveler preparing for a longer journey. 0.03. The overview of the new theology traces its roots, locates its targets, gives its grounds, and sketches its applications. A brief outline of each task immediately follows. Later remarks provide more details. 0.031. The new theology has its roots in the thought of a late medieval Carthusian mystic, Hugh of Balma. 0.3101. Hugh says that the soul is capable of attaining union with God through a purely non-cognitive upsurge, affectus in Latin, of mystical love. 0.3102. Yet on either the conventional Aristotelian or Platonic epistemology current in Hugh's day, the affectus initially appears to be cognitive after all. 0.03103. However, Hugh challenges the conventional epistemology. God is fire, directly received by the soul, light that yields essential knowledge of itself only later when it illuminates the surrounding field of being and non-being. The essential knowledge is that divinity is distinct from all being and non-being. 0.031031. That the essential knowledge is that divinity is distinct from all being and not being. I forgot to mention the proper decimal number. 0.31032. If God is distinct from all being and non-being, then since metaphysics is the study of being, Hugh's view of God is non-metaphysical. And finally, for tonight, 0.031033. Still, Hugh does not describe the nature of mystical love, or how it might guide us in everyday life. So our tree must grow and bloom beyond its roots. Now that should give you a flavor of what I want to try to accomplish in this overview, Tractatus Theologico-Philosophicus, inspired by Wittgenstein's Tractatus, but I'm taking things in a different direction. And eventually, I hope to come to the ideas that I would like to take from Wittgenstein to use to develop my own perspective at a crucial point. But I don't want to get into that until the time is right, and that isn't yet. So I will hopefully compose more of these remarks for you in the future. I am going to post them on Twitter under my other persona, but I'm going to share them with you here because I think some of you might find this interesting. I hope so. And in any event, it's good for me to try to articulate these things to an audience so that I can become clearer in my thinking and do a good job with the task that I think I have been given to execute. So that's my purpose in doing this. I hope you enjoy it. As I said, if you have questions or comments that are germane to this, please feel free to share them. And if I can respond, then I shall certainly do so. But in any event, this is Katje Eckhart. Thank you for joining me. I wish everyone, as always, a safe, a peaceful, and a restful good evening. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. I care for all of you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, this is Katje, wishing everybody a good night. Thanks again. Bye.